Welcome and Vanakkam. In this video, we take a dispassionate and somewhat critical view of an unfortunate aspect of religion, which is its intolerance of human freedom. The paradox about religion and the custodians of religion in particular is that they will clamor for religious freedom, but they will not respect freedom in the practice of their respective religions as far as their co-religionists are concerned. When it comes to the members of a particular religious community, religious freedom is reduced to the freedom only to conform, the freedom never to think, the freedom to think, the freedom especially to dissent, the freedom to deepen one's understanding, the freedom to attain clarity. All these things are denied to the members of every religious community. And whatever I'm saying in this video has special reference to the Christian community because that's a community that I know best. But I also know that one community is as good or as bad in this respect as another. Human predicament in the religious context is universally the same. The idea that religions are different does not mean that the plight of religious communities is different, especially in regard to religious freedom. Now, my concern here is that religious freedom is fundamental to understanding the religion concerned and to practicing it at the level of informed choice and conviction. Now, let's understand this proposition in its context. We know that a vast majority of people are born into their respective religions. Therefore, the religion that you happen to practice or the religion that you happen to have is not a religion of your choice, for the simple reason that you don't have the choice of your parents. You became a Christian, a Hindu, or a Muslim, or whatever by birth. And you are not responsible for your birth. Your birth is not a matter of your choice. The only thing that's within the choice as far as religion is concerned is the choice through conversion. But oftentimes conversion becomes suspect because conversion is practiced by people who have no idea as to what it is. They have no idea about the religion into which they convert and the religion from which they convert. And therefore, the practice of conversion leaves a lot to be desired. And I have great reservations about it. And this is not now. I've been expressing my concerns and reservations about conversion over the last 30 years and more. And that's based on Jesus' own objection to conversion, which is clearly stated in the 23rd chapter of Matthew's Gospel. When I mention this, most Christians are shocked and surprised. Unfortunately, they don't know Jesus, though they claim to be Christians. Jesus said very emphatically, denouncing the practice of conversion by the scribes and Pharisees of the priestly class of his days. He said, you go around all over the world to gain converts, but their plight is 10 times worse after conversion than before it. And I don't think that situation has changed much since then. Okay, but that's not my main theme. So, we don't have the freedom to choose a religion. Which religion we happen to practice is not a matter of choice. And whatever we happen to do without choice is not an experience or expression of freedom. It's a state of mere accident. It is accidental that we became Christians or Hindus or Muslims or whatever. In other words, we are accidental Christians, accidental Muslims, accidental Hindus, accidental Sikhs, so on and so forth. That's the first thing to remember, and it's a very humbling thought. The second thing we must remember about religion is that literally no one really understands or even bothers to understand the religion he or she practices. And to that extent, it is very doubtful if we are practicing a religion at all. We do carry certainly religious labels, but to what extent, to what purpose, and how meaningfully and how sincerely we practice a religion is a matter of serious doubt. How can you practice something you don't understand? I challenge you to think for a moment and ask yourself the question. I'm saying this to my Christian friends. How many of you can say, hand on heart, that you understand the biblical faith, that you understand the way of Jesus Christ? I challenge you. If you have any modicum of honesty left, you will say, I know nothing. That's my own predicament, frankly. I used to be a very hectic preacher, but suddenly this thought occurred to me about 8 years ago that I am actually teaching people out of my ignorance. I do not know the teachings of Jesus Christ. I do not know the way of Jesus Christ. Yes, I know much of his teachings by heart. Yes, I have learned by heart a great deal of the teachings of Jesus Christ. But that doesn't mean that I know either Jesus or his spiritual vision. Now, here let me borrow an idea from Socrates. Socrates said, and he had a very interesting way of putting it, he said, you don't understand something unless you understand it. Now, what does that mean? Sounds rather strange, no? Now, Socrates is playing on the meaning of words. The word understand has two meanings. One is the familiar meaning, to know. To understand is to know the meaning of or what this means. But there is another meaning to the word understand. It means standing under. You must stand under. That is to say, you must do, you must practice. Now you recall how Jesus concluded the Sermon on the Mount, and you see that recorded in the 7th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, verses 24 to 28, where Jesus says, he who hears these words of mine and does them, hear and do, only then you understand. Understanding alone makes us wise. So he who hears these words of mine and does them is like the wise man who built his house upon the rock. And a man who only hears and does not do what Jesus said is like the foolish man who built his house on the sand and it collapses. So this emphasis is absolutely clear. The only way to understand anything spiritual is to understand it in the meaning of Socrates. Socrates said, you cannot understand unless you understand. That is, unless you stand under, unless you put it to practice, unless you allow that to guide you into action, and through action and the experience action generates, you understand what it is. Till then, you really do not know, even if you know this by heart. As in the case of the expert in the Jewish law that you come across in the 10th chapter of Luke's Gospel, where the man knows that he has to love his neighbor, but he does not know who his neighbor is. Therefore, what is the use? He may go on parroting this commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, but so long as he remains ignorant as to who his neighbor is, his knowing the commandment and his not knowing it are both the same. And that is a predicament of all of us. What does the spiritual vision of Jesus Christ mean? Do we have any idea about his idea of the kingdom of God? What was Jesus' idea of being human? Why did Jesus say you must have life in all its fullness? What does that mean? Jesus says, be free. Jesus says, be born again. What does that mean? Everything has been misunderstood. I can prove to you from start to finish that Christians have misunderstood everything lethally. Lethally is the word. And there is a reason for it. The reason is that the freedom to think, the freedom to seek, the freedom to find, the freedom to understand, the freedom to share the findings of our seekings is completely denied to Christians. A priestly class has arisen. They have misappropriated the total control of the three pillars of religion. This is not my view. This is what the great sociologist of religion, Max Weber, in his classic work, The Sociology of Religion, a text that I would recommend to all my viewers, he says that as soon as a priestly class emerges in a religious community, they immediately establish their complete control, their hegemony over the people. And he goes on to say that they do so by seizing complete control and maintaining total monopoly over the three pillars of religion, which are the scriptures, the dogmas and doctrines, and the rites and rituals. And the lay people will have no authority in respect to any of these three pillars. That's entirely claimed and kept as an exclusive preserve of the priests. Now, as a result, the individual freedom to understand the scriptures, the individual freedom to know the meaning of the rituals, the freedom to know the doctrines and dogmas, what they mean and what they don't mean, it's completely denied. If a lay person shows some initiative in thinking about these things, and if the priestly class comes to know about it, he will be suppressed with all the force they can muster. And yet, we are required to endorse whatever these items and articles of belief are. Let's take a concrete example. Every Sunday, when a Christian goes to church and attends a Sunday service, he is required to parrot a creed. A creed is a summary of the various articles, the key articles of belief. Now, for example, these articles include things like with the virgin birth, the immaculate conception. It includes things like Jesus resurrecting on the third day, descending into hell, ascending to heaven, and so on and so forth. Now, suppose you as a Christian feel bamboozled by this idea of virgin birth. I'm not saying that, the idea of virgin birth is all bungam and all. That's not what I'm saying. Please don't misunderstand. Please don't jump to conclusions. Whether I believe in virgin birth or not is not the issue at this present time. We shall take that up in due course. But suppose you, as a believer, want to know what it means. You approach a priest. What do you think his reaction will be? He'll say, "Shut up. How dare you ask such questions? You only have to believe. Don't be rebellious. Don't get too smart." Okay? If you can find a single priest who will entertain any of your questions regarding the key articles of faith which you are required every Sunday to parrot, then I'll salute him. I'll accept him as my guru. In half a century, I have not come across a single priest who takes the time and the trouble to do so. Maybe no priest is able to do so. So how can you repeat something of which you don't have the foggiest idea? That's a measure of the extent to which the freedom to think and express oneself is completely denied in the realm of religion. And my main argument is that religion has become a domain of ignorance, confirmed, hardened, total ignorance, precisely because freedom of religion is completely denied to believers. So the custodians of religion will claim religious freedom as guaranteed in the Constitution of India, Article number 25, and any infringement of that freedom will be decried. They'll come out on the streets and beat their breast and tear the heavens with lamentations, as Shakespeare would say. But if any of the members of the religious community wants to exercise religious freedom, they will use a sledgehammer to crack his or her skull. As simple as that. That is why, my friends, the history of Christianity is a terrible history of the persecution of heretics. Who were these heretics? Actually, they were the pride of the flock. They were the most honest, sincere people who tried to combine their Christian faith with personal dignity. They did not want to become human parrots. They wanted to understand. They wanted to use their God-given capacity to seek and find, as Jesus said. It's a duty that Jesus has enjoined on all his disciples, all his followers. Matthew chapter 7, verse 7. Seek and find. Seek and find. On the other hand, if within the Christian community, with Christian churches today, if you seek, you'll have a sledgehammer on your skull. It's as simple as that. There's no church which will grant you freedom of thought, freedom of expression. Not even 1%. The political structure will grant you freedom of thought and expression. Of course, it's always under siege. There's no question about it. The extent to which you can enjoy freedom of thought in a political structure would vary from time to time. But there's always a modicum of that left. But in my experience, spread over half a century, I can tell you that freedom of religion is zero within religion. Whereas the political structure will grant you freedom of religion to a large extent. Unfortunately, people who are very zealous about their religion never take note of this very interesting contradiction that freedom of religion is actually respected more by politicians than by the custodians of religions. Now, the lamentable aspect of this is that because freedom of religion is denied to us, we don't understand the articles of faith or the teachings of the great luminaries who founded our religions. And these religions are very valuable. I'm not someone who decries religions per se. Of course, I have absolutely no value for the rigmarole of the priestly class, the rites, rituals, the superstitions, the customs and the traditions, the religious laws and obligations with which they burden the life of the believers. That is a completely useless baggage, and the sooner we liberate ourselves from all of that, the better. We become religious donkeys who are made to carry this meaningless burden invented and imposed on us by the priestly class. When I say this, people think that I say this because I have some vested interest, some personal grudge against priests. I have been a priest myself. I have nothing against them personally. I am certainly concerned about the deleterious, harmful, deadly effect that this priestly baggage has on the people. It is so very evident, and anyone who loves fellow human beings cannot remain indifferent to it. So the first issue that all of us who take our religious life seriously, and I would actually use the word spiritual life seriously, have to take note of is the extent to which freedom of religion is denied to believers within the religious structures, the churches, for example. Whether this is true about members of other religions, I want them to decide for themselves. Now, the second danger consequent to this complete abolition of freedom of thought, I would say it's not only the freedom of thought, it's the duty to think. Thinking is a duty. Dissent is a duty in the religious context. Otherwise, we would not have had different religions. It's only because Lord Buddha exercised the spiritual duty to dissent vis-a-vis Hinduism that Buddhism came into being. The same is applicable to the birth of Sikhism. If Jesus did not exercise the holy duty to dissent vis-a-vis the Judaic religious system, there would have been no Christian faith. People don't realize that the holiest duty actually is not the duty to conform. but it is the duty to dissent. But the duty to dissent, if it is to be holy, is not merely saying no or just boycotting everything or insulting religious authorities. The holy way of dissenting is seeking a higher reality in relation to which humankind can attain a higher and better degree of human growth, development, dignity, freedom, fulfillment, peace, harmony, etc. So, the duty to dissent becomes holy only when it is tempered, complemented, disciplined by the duty to turn to a higher order of reality and to order one's own life and the life of one's fellow human beings in accordance with that. In other words, this is what I call byproduct dissent. Not dissent by intent, but dissent as a byproduct. That is to say, take the case of Jesus. Jesus, of course, was very familiar with the Jewish religious system, customs, practices, obligations, etc. After all, he was born in a very conventional, traditional, devout Jewish family. But at a certain point in time, he attained spiritual enlightenment. He had this mystical union with God the Father. His will and the will of the Father became one. So that actually placed him on a very high pedestal of spiritual understanding, especially understanding the human predicament, what it is now and what it can well be. And he was appalled at the gulf between the human condition as of now and as it was meant to be, the gulf between the real and the ideal. So his commitment to the ideal, which is the perfect harmony of the will of man and the will of God, makes it absolutely necessary for him to disagree with this whole rigmarole of priestly control and practices, because so long as people live in subjection to this priestly baggage, they will stay stuck in the status quo. They will not be able to go 1 inch forward, and they will be robbed of their glorious destiny, and they will be consigned to mediocrity in the experience of the goodness of their humanity. So this is what I call byproduct dissent. Dissent that comes about as a byproduct of a higher commitment. Only such dissent is holy. And that dissent, unfortunately, is the one thing that no organized religion will grant the freedom for. And in Christian religion particularly, the history of Christianity, if you look at the Spanish Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition was not oppression unleashed against people of other faiths. It's the oppression of Christians by Christians. In fact, more accurately put, it's the oppression of the best Christians by the worst Christians. So, this is a problem which is inherent in the denial of religious freedom. Now, unfortunately, people who are very mediocre, and mediocre people are always vulnerable to, and they harbor a lot of insecurity. They know that they're presiding over a house of cards, which they think is their religious empire. And therefore, they feel that if individuals are granted the freedom to seek and to find, their empire will collapse like a house of cards. And anyone who harbors this psychology of insecurity will also be intolerant. So, religious intolerance, in my opinion, is a necessary byproduct of the religious mediocrity. If a person is mediocre, rest assured he will be intolerant. And therefore, all religious systems and structures, every church, every denomination, is under the tyranny of mediocre people. Religion, organized religion, is an empire of mediocrity, where mediocrity tyrannizes over others. You go to any congregation today, at least 75% of the members of the congregation would be more enlightened than the priest who presides over their eternal destiny. Without a doubt, that's the case. I would say that spiritually, some of the illiterate mothers are spiritually far superior to some of these highly trained priests and bishops who think no end of themselves. And Jesus himself alerted us to this reality through the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector who went to pray. The Pharisee thought no end of himself, whereas the tax collector, who is aware of his sinfulness, he says, I don't even dare to look up to you. Please accept me, the sinner. And Jesus says that man found acceptance in the presence of God. The Pharisee who went to showcase his religious merit was rejected. He became an object of divine contempt. So this distinction is very clear. So the reason why religion becomes, or religious communities, religious churches become empires of mediocrity is that there is no religious freedom. If religious freedom is granted and believers realize that dissent is a sacred duty, the kind of holy dissent that I described, rest assured there will be a tremendous transformation of our church life. Church life will not become the tyranny of the mediocre people. And religious zeal will not become an outworking of religious ignorance. It is impossible to be a bigot, no matter which religion you practice. It's impossible to be a religious bigot except in a state of murderous ignorance of one's own religion. Any intolerance, any sign of faith in violence, any cruelty, any hatred, any communal alienation unleashed against anybody else is first an atrocity perpetrated on one's own religion, the best part of one's own religion, its spiritual core. Only secondarily is it an atrocity directed against somebody else. It is this basic truth that needs to be propagated. So the first thing that everyone who takes their religion seriously needs to realize is, alas, we don't understand our religions. We are total aliens and strangers to our own religion, which we think we love so much. Secondly, because we are ignorant of our religion, because religious freedom is an illusion, it's a chimera. Third, because religious freedom is an illusion, and that lack of freedom has prevented us from understanding our faith, we all become, on the one hand, more and more dependent on the priestly class, and on the other hand, become negative in our attitude towards others. And this negativity, combined with our ignorance, which together produce a state of underdevelopment in us, infects us with this epidemic of insecurity. And that insecurity expresses itself as religious intolerance, which we are unfortunately made to believe is some kind of religious virtue. Religious zeal, be zealous for your church. That's the greatest disservice you can do to your religion. I say to you today, do not be zealous for your religion, because if you are zealous for your religion, you will never live your spiritual light. The best way to put out your spiritual light, the best way to corrupt your personality, the best way to kill your conscience, the best way to stifle your sense of fellow humanity is by harboring religious zeal. Whereas zeal for truth, zeal for justice, zeal for universal love, loving everyone including enemies, zeal for compassion, a culture of compassion, all that's fine. That ennobles us, that brings out the best in us, that nourishes our humanity. It makes us better human beings. That's why the great spiritual luminary in Kerala, Sri Narayana Guru, said, it doesn't matter which religion you practice. All that it matters is become better human beings. In other words, he was very clear that religion was superfluous to the human need to improve in one's humanity. It doesn't matter which religion you practice, it means religion is superfluous. Can you become a better human being? That will take care of everything. And centuries before Sri Narayana Guru, Saint Augustine of Hippo, Bishop of Hippo, Saint Augustine, Bishop of Hippo said, love God and do as you please. Love God and do as you please. Meaning, if you love God, you can be free of your religion. You don't have to mind a single custom, obligation, rule, right, or rubric of organized religion. Is there love in your soul for God? That's all. Nothing more is required. But if there is love in your soul for God, there will be a commitment to the welfare of your fellow human beings and a resolute refusal to be divided and fooled. Wherever there is love, there is unity. Wherever there is love, there is commitment to truth. Wherever there is love, there is concern for justice. And wherever there is love, surely there will be a culture of compassion. And if these things are taken care of, all shall be well. But unfortunately, we are kept miles away from all of this because the freedom to grow and understand the heart of the spiritual traditions to which we belong is utterly denied to us. All that is useless, all that is dark and dismal, all that is poisonous to humanity is showcased, is thrust upon people, and whatever is the deed of love, whatever is the expression of light, that is suffocated, stifled, and kept under wraps. I think this is an aberration, and it's high time that we became aware of it. And that's the reason I thought I would claim a little time to share my heart's anguish in this regard with all of you. Religion must serve as an influence for the better, not as a corrupting, corroding influence. It should be the manifestation of light, not of darkness. It should have the stamp of life, not of death. And all of these things are comprehended in the idea of religious freedom. Religious freedom is not the freedom to strangulate somebody else on account of a religion. Religious freedom is not freedom to steal sheep from some other religious fold. Religious freedom is not the freedom to dominate people in the name of God as the priestly class does. Religious freedom is the freedom to be in alliance with the will of God. God, who is the universal Father of all, the universal family which Hinduism also intuited, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We all belong to this one cosmic family. If there is God, there is only one God. And if there is only one God, then we cannot but be members of the same family. And no divisive agenda, no hate project can ever be justified if we have this vision. And anything short of that is not worth it. It is nothing but the diabolic project built on falsehood, sustained and nourished by force, with the deleterious effect of degrading human beings into servitude, bondage, and slavery in the name of God, who calls human beings to freedom and to life in all its fullness. I hope we shall stay clear of this aberration and work together to make this spiritual light prevail in our midst. Jai Hind, God's love for all without any distinction of class, religion, gender, culture, any difference whatsoever. We are one. We are one in God. Thank you.